cuts through you.
Yeah, it really does. So how are you enjoying the times?
It's an adjustment.
Not been all that long, right?
7.5 months.
Yeah.
Probably easier to speak.
We can lean in. There's no way to. Well, I live in we got enough here for a basketball team. I think we've got. We got the subject covered.
I think the problem is I initially said I couldn't do it because then I reneged on my reneging.
You're our surprise guest.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. My homies are here.
Really?
That's Marty. Marty is Marty. We have Thanksgiving. And Andrew Miller is
Trump? No.
we all have
Michael
Thanksgiving every year.
Robert. Maybe Robert.
Died in 1970. He married Leslie.
Okay.
Okay.
Russ
Are we live?
did. Not only that.
Okay, all right.
Good morning. I have the great pleasure of officially opening the Sunday session of the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival. My name is Sue Ellen Lazarus. When we decided, after that we saw the Friday night panel so quickly sold out, I knew I'd lost my mind when we decided to add a Sunday morning at 8:30. But we're thrilled that these people, these wonderful people, responded, getting up early on their Sundays. And Jeremy Hobson, the co-host of NPR's Here and Now, kindly agreed to be the moderator. So we're just going to turn it over to him because we have a surprise guest, which Jeremy will tell you about. So we're just going to begin, and then the full program for the festival begins at 9:30. There is coffee, there are muffins and not donuts. We do ask that people who have not made a $20 donation do so, and we also ask that you make a donation of $20 and get a book back. So thanks for coming. Have a great day here, and thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. What a great crowd, by the way, for 8:30 in the morning on a beautiful day on Martha's Vineyard. This is fantastic. I'm here representing WBUR, which is really proud to help with the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival. And also as somebody who's been coming since I was a kid to stay with Sue Ellen and family here on Martha's Vineyard, I have to say it is Chilmark has always been my favorite town in Massachusetts. It's so beautiful, so it's great to be here. So did you figure out who our surprise guest is this morning? He's right here next to me. So Glenn Thrush of the New York Times joins us this morning. Rick Patterson, opinion writer for the Boston Globe and author of 22 books. Mark Leibovich, chief national correspondent for the New York Times Magazine. Ashley Parker, White House reporter for the Washington Post. Mike Bender of the Wall Street Journal. And E.J. Dionne, opinion writer for the Washington Post. And also a commentator on NPR's All Things Considered, where 17 years ago I went and recorded him as an intern for the show at his office, which he pretends to remember, but I don't think he really does.
Oh, I remember it very well. You bailed me out.
All right. So there's a story in the New York Times this morning. I don't know if you guys got up early enough to read it, but there's a story in the New York Times this morning about people potentially challenging Trump in 2020 with a lot of focus on Mike Pence. So I'm just going to open it up to anybody who wants to jump in first here. Do we see anybody a Republican, who would be willing to go up against Trump at this point?
Pence is funny because he was going to lose in Indiana it looked like, for governor. So, I mean, this was a Hail Mary for him. And he's been doing this dance since then of being loyal to Trump when he could be, and then in the wake of the Access Hollywood tapes, for example, sort of going off stage and just waiting for Trump to fail, and when he didn't, he came back. So he's doing this very odd dance, cozying up to Koch brothers, at the same time being loyal to Trump. And it seems like he's almost preemptive, because if you're running from the right, if you're Sass, for example, or you're Cruz, Pence may not be the most gifted guy, but he's there first. He's got the succession and vice presidency, he's got the visibility, he's got the money, he's already started to pack. So I would say that if Trump for any reason fades, then Pence is in the driver's seat.
You started by saying Pence was funny. That's the first time I ever heard that.
That was a mental analysis.
Could I just say a couple things? One, it's great to be with this panel. Mark Leibovich, when he wrote that wonderful profile of Tom Brady for the New York Times, part of this great book he's almost finished with. I'm plugging his future book.
Don't speak.
Oh, okay. It's a great book anyway, coming on the NFL. I always like to say, and this is the only crowd, one of the only crowds I can do this with, most unpopular thing I am is a New England Patriots fan, but not here. And that I loved Deflategate because I knew for the first time the joys of being a Fox News commentator. I didn't care what the facts were. I just knew which side I was on. So thank you, Mark, for letting me tell my joke. I think just very briefly, what's striking is how many Republicans are already ready to run either against Trump or on the assumption that he's not going to run at all by 2020, or that maybe he will be driven out. Now, all predictions about Trump seem to be proven false, so I won't make any lest they not become true. But I think there are a lot of people ready to challenge him, and I'm quite sure that somebody will get into a primary against him unless the entire country turns around, unemployment goes down to 1%, and peace reigns all over the earth, which I think is unlikely.
What about on the Democratic side? Have we seen anybody yet? I mean, people have talked about Kamala Harris, the senator from California. Now Mark Zuckerberg is all over the news that he's got a pollster and he's thinking about it. But are we seeing anybody emerge who could actually go up against Trump and win?
I guess I'll start, first of all, just with the Republicans. I think this is all really premature, with all due respect to all of my two colleagues who wrote the story today. You'll note that everyone, if you read the story, has very, very strenuously trying not to be running. I don't think they actually are running really yet. I think the problem with people challenging Trump from the Republican side is more than one getting in, because as soon as they start splitting votes, that would, I don't think any of us have any really great insight into who might be running, except for maybe John Kasich Ohio has been sort of laying the groundwork for a while. As for Democrats, we could sit up here all day and just name about 20, 30 names. It doesn't seem like anyone is holding themselves back. There have been a bunch of people, Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, Biden. We could play the name game. I don't think,
Massachusetts always has to have somebody in the national political conversation, I've learned.
Who loses?
Every registered Democrat thinks that they would be a better president than Trump. Therefore, it's going to be an enormous field. Ashley.
I know nothing about Democrats, but I can speak to Pence a little bit. When he got announced, I was to be the VP. I was sent out with him for 5 weeks, and I can tell you the only time people care about Mike Pence is in moments of utter catastrophe. So the most in demand I was as a Pence reporter was when his plane skidded off the tarmac. But I find it. And then the other sort of weird dance was basically we would chase him around, and the only question we ever asked Mike Pence was, "Donald Trump said this. What do you have to say?" And so I think he's sort of only interested in that capacity. And other than becoming a vice president, if something happens to the president, I think he has a tougher road against a field of Republicans.
Are you comparing Donald Trump to a plane crash?
Well, the one thing about Pence, though, is he just rehired his Svengali, a guy by the name of Nick Ayers, who worked for
the Republican Governors Association, and is a knife fighter. So he is the exact opposite of what the image that Pence projects. And you know, there's sort of a duality in Pence. He's kind of the Eddie Haskell of politics, right? But he's also, so he's got this guy Ayers who is pushing his way into meetings in the West Wing and trying to get a bigger footprint. And he also has his legislative affairs director, Mark Short, who is arguably the most competent and effective person in the White House, and he is a Koch brothers alum and somebody who's been pushing quietly the deregulatory agenda. So, you know, Pence, I think we talk about these various factions in the White House. Pence is not as empowered or as interesting a vice president as Biden was, but he clearly occupies a significant part of real estate, and people shouldn't underestimate the extent to which his people are involved in governing.
Okay, we haven't heard from Mike yet, so I want to change topics here to John Kelly, the new White House Chief of Staff, who has now been in that position almost as long as Anthony Scaramucci. Whole job. But you wrote a piece called Kelly's Rules for Trump's West Wing, Stop Bickering, Get in Early, Make an Appointment.
Yeah.
Do you think that he's made a difference already, or are you noticing anything different under Kelly?
Yeah, I think he's made a real difference initially here, and I think that may be his that may be his kind of biggest weakness here. The more success that John Kelly has early, the more credit he starts getting for anything, any success that comes out of the White House.
Which Trump doesn't like, you're saying?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That'll come back to, depending on how he handles it, depending on how it's portrayed in the media. You know, there's only one person in the spotlight in this administration gets it, and and that's the president. The president the president gets upset when journalists start to get too much attention covering him.
That's why Glenn's arm is broken.
But yeah, I mean, the things the thing that's kind of amazing so far is that Kelly's getting credit for sort of normal operating procedure of any kind of city hall office, let alone the president of the United States. I mean, we have in the story that he the last chief of staff had a TV on during senior staff meetings in the morning. He's turned it off. He had a meeting on a policy direction, and a side debate broke out between two senior aides in the front of the president. And he said, in the Oval Office, and he booted him from the office and said, "Work it out, and when you've resolved it, come back, and let's not waste the president's time with this ancillary issue." The way I heard that story was that 2 weeks ago, that little side debate would have derailed the meeting, would have wasted 20 minutes from the president. And, so if you calculate that out, you're saving the president X number of hours during the week. Even in front of his own office, people would kind of loiter around. His office, when you walk in, is to the right, there's sort of a suite of assistants, and then Bannon's next to him, and Jared Kushner's next to him. So you'd sort of just kind of hang out in that area, hoping to catch one of them coming in and out. Even staffers now are told they have to wait in the lobby with and sit on the couches and read the newspapers until they're ready. So it's kind of like standard operating procedure that he's brought to the White House, and the more credit he gets for that, I think that the bigger trouble he's in.
I think one of the issues is he's obviously not going to be able to change Trump. So does he, by changing the information flow to Trump and the number of people who are talking to Trump, who has a very short attention span and very limited retention, will he change in any way the decision-making process and make it more rational and better than it has been?
Well, how do Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon feel about Kelly?
Bannon's really, really excited about this, and you look at the first week, and you see why. They came out and had a big press conference on an immigration bill that really has no path forward in a Republican-controlled Congress, but he got to spend. That's in his wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. They're going after China on intellectual property issues, which he wants a war with China, a trade war with China. So I think And Bannon's also a former military. He is super excited to work alongside a 4-star general, and Steve's also someone who shows up to the office and wants to get things done. Kelly's putting a process in place to get things done, so he's excited. And that actually one of the things I think too is good for Kelly is that all these warring factions in the White House respect Kelly. Whether that's Kushner or Cohn, Bannon. One thing Newt Gingrich told me while we were reporting the story is that everyone in the White House likes referring to him as general. Right?
I think Bannon, I'd add one bit of nuance. Bannon was on really, really thin ice about a week and a half ago. And Trump,
What was it that Scaramucci said about him again? I forget. Sorry, go ahead.
He was ambidextrous.
And little known fact, General Kelly has instituted mandatory yoga classes.
You were saying he was on thin ice.
Why'd you have to bring it to that level, man? Talking about grave matters of state here. Bannon was on really, really thin ice. Trump, I think the Bannon show has played itself out to some extent. And I think Bannon, I don't think Kelly is tremendously all that sold into Bannon at this point in time. My sense was there was a relatively minor staff shuffle that occurred a couple of days ago. A National Security Council staffer, Ezra Cohen Watnick, sounds like my rabbi when I was growing up. Actually, my grandmother's best friend was Molly Watnick, but I don't know why you guys remember that. He was ousted, and what happened afterwards, he was an ally of Jared Kushner and Bannon had stopped the National Security Advisor, McMaster, from firing him. And that it was a really seminal illustration of what was wrong with the White House. You get Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon blocking McMaster from running his own National Security Council. That firing was gonna happen. Kelly facilitated it and really highlighted it. And that was a shot across the bow for both Kushner and Bannon. Then what happened after that was done was there was a backlash in the conservative media. And so there was an attack on McMaster by these guys who left and their allies. I am told, my sources tell me, that folks inside the White House who were close to Kelly viewed that as Bannon overstepping his bounds. So I would very much watch the space between Kelly and Bannon. I think it could get a little hot.
Could I make a statement by way of a question in a way to the folks who really know the White House, which is, if you look at Kelly, McMaster, and Mattis, it seems that Mattis has kept the most distance, in a sense, from Trump's views. He's only occasionally really gone out to defend some of the more controversial things. McMaster is somewhere in the middle where he has sort of occasionally defended what some of us might, or at least I would regard as outrageous. Then Kelly has been the one most sympathetic to Trump and Trump's view of the world. How do you read that general triumvirate to, Ashley or Mike or Glenn? What is that like? Because I think Kelly is the one who's got this job because he is the most loyal to Trumpism, to the extent that one can define that.
I would briefly add Nikki Haley to that list of people who have sort of been able to have a voice that's out in front of the president and more forceful. But the interesting thing about McMaster is he's the one who is also sort of more of the adult in the room and often is put in the position of telling the president, no, we can't do that to our, longtime ally or whatever. This is a tricky situation. And as the adult, there have been a lot of stories about Trump and McMaster sort of chafing at one another in a kind of fraught relationship. And it's because the president sort of begrudges McMaster always being the bad guy, the one in meetings who has to return him to focus, the one who has to say, well, in your briefing book, it actually says this, so you can't say that incorrect fact. And so the people who succeed, and I think Kelly has actually stood up to him a little bit more in terms of, but he's found a sort of nicer or more nuanced way to do it. Like, my sense is that Kelly will say, the solar wall with Mexico is a really fascinating idea, but what if we just tried something more bricks and mortar? So it's sort of finding a way to deliver bad news to the president.
Well, you have to also have a transparent wall in case somebody throws drugs over the top of it so you can see who doesn't hit you on the head. That was something that Trump said, by the way. Mark, Do you think that the media have gotten any better at hearing from the people who put Trump in office and telling that story since the election?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a bit of a the question that the coastal bubble media ignores the people that elected Trump, I think was probably fair about a year ago. I think we have a bit of an overcorrect now in which you have some sort of shallow, thrown-off efforts to say Trump voters are still with him, and here's why that's interesting or not. I think obviously it's a hard thing to cover, but I think that using we in a media, I think the media is probably doing better, although it's hard because Trump is not out in the country very much, and also polling, especially in this population, is very, it's hard to read. But yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is not. I think this is an ongoing story. I think it's an evolution. It's an evolving population, but also something that I think we're all grappling with, and I think we're probably smarter now than we were a year ago.
Good as for this book that Tom Mann and Norm Ornstein and I have coming out on September 19th, we ended up doing a lot of research back on how were Trump folks covered. And on the one hand, it's clearly true that I think elites in the country were not paying enough attention to the flattening of economies in large parts of the country, not only in the center of the country, just down the road in my hometown of Fall River, when you look at the unemployment rates we have had and the fact that Trump actually ran ahead of Mitt Romney in Fall River, just like he did in Reading, Pennsylvania. So I think elites weren't paying enough attention to suffering. But when you look at the media, and I can say a lot of critical things about our profession, there were a lot of people out there talking all the time to Trump voters. I found some really powerful stories about Trump voters and their discontents going back a ways because Trump's rise surprised the media so much that there was coverage. And I agree with Mark that now it's as if the only people in the country who matter are Trump's base, and the media go back and interview them. So if Trump is down to 10% approval, the story will say, well, the 10% hardcore Trumpers are still with him. So I think there is that overcorrection. But I found some really good stories about how Trump folks were thinking quite a ways back.
It just reminded me of a moment I went right before the South Carolina primary to this little town called Walterboro, South Carolina, where Trump was holding a rally. And I met this guy who was probably 30 years old. And I said, why are you supporting Trump? And he said, well, the movie theater and the bowling alley here in Walterboro closed down. And I think Trump would put up the money to open them back up again. And I think he'll definitely raise the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. So I think there was a I want to be rich like him, Yeah,
my version of that was early on in the campaign after the Megyn Kelly comment during the debate, and I went back. We had just come out with a poll, and a lot of times when you get polled, the pollsters will ask you, "Do you mind if a reporter calls you later?" So I went back and found the Trump supporter, the female Trump supporters in our poll that time, and started calling them down, saying, "What do you think about this? Do you still support him?" And one woman who was at the top of the story was older and said, "Look, I really feel for Megyn Kelly. I'm a very shapely woman, and when I was coming up, it was really hard for me to every male boss I had was always hitting on me, wanting to sleep with me." And then said, "Well, who are you going to vote for?" I said, "Well, Trump."
Rick, want to weigh in here on how the media has done and.
Well, I think there are a couple of distinctions to make. First is during the campaign and after the campaign. The second is between the cable media, in particular, and print. I agree that, people like George Saunders in New Yorker, long before November, were writing really penetrating stuff about the Trump people. On the other hand, cable news gave Trump about $3 billion of free media, a real ride. The Shorenstein Media Center at Harvard did a very interesting survey of this, and the remarkably uncritical megaphone that they gave Trump really was invaluable to him. I think there's pre-campaign and post-campaign. I think the media really has been doing sort of makeup work on Trump. It's actually remarkable. I've never heard the word lie used so often by the media, which is schooled in objectivity, but they've really been pressed to it by Trump. So, I mean, remarkably now, as Glenn was talking the other night, there's a real adversarial relationship, but that's still principally with print people. And the gap was really huge before November of 2016.
Glenn, have the media gotten any better at holding him to account when he says things that aren't true?
Well, I think the problem is the audience. I mean, you have a certain component of the audience that no matter what you tell them about Donald Trump, they don't believe you. I mean, I said this the other night. It now is okay in this country to have an opinion about a fact. And I think that has been, you know, it was funny. A couple of years ago, one of my favorite Saturday Night Live bits was they would do a send-up of Fox and Friends. And then after they did the segment, they would run this quick scroll of corrections. Right? And I thought that was hilarious until that happened in real life. And the real danger here, and not to get up on a soapbox on this stuff, is truth is being devalued every single day. You know, it's hilarious that the president puts out a tweet yesterday that says, "I am not on vacation in Bedminster." Meetings! Exclamation point. Calls! Exclamation point. Right? And then 5 minutes later, Mike Memoli, our colleague, posts an Instagram of him in a golf cart with a thumbs up. That's hilarious and everything, but it just, it just devalues the currency. And it just creates an environment in which we are, a fair segment of the population is saying that the wall between truth and BS is fungible, and it's not.
I guess I would also say, though, I think we underestimate. Far be it to me to interrupt Glenn's applause. Keep applauding. We underestimate just the pure power. I mean, we can talk about cultural issues and economic issues and the media missing the Trump voter story. I mean, just reflexive partisanship remains an extremely powerful thing. And by partisan, I don't so much mean Democrat, Republican. I mean people who are seen as, I'm going to come out and say it, all of us. I mean, people who are opposite to what the WBUR listener represents. And I don't mean to put everyone, I'm sure there are people in Ohio.
We've got listeners of all stripes. I see it in the comments section.
No, but how about this on Martha's Vineyard, specifically in Chilmark? And I can narrow it down a little more, but yeah, I don't mean to.
Not Edgartown.
But look, a couple of things that are, I think, relevant here. I mean, one, when Nixon was run out of office, his approvals among his supporters were in the 70s and 80s. So this is not a new phenomena. And since we're mentioning books, I mean, one of the things, in covering the NFL that is interesting to me is that there's a kind of tribalism embedded into football and our country's love of football that predicted Trump in some ways, because people shape their opinions based on their loyalties. You mentioned Deflategate. There is this map of the United States in which 15% of the country absolutely believe that Tom Brady was railroaded. I'm one of them. You're one of them. And all 15, and there are probably a few of us here, 15% all put in the 6-state area in the country. Make that, let's say it's blue. The whole rest of the country, entire rest of the country, except for a tiny slice of Utah, blue or red. So, again, we tailor our views to our loyalties in many ways.
Could I, first of all, I heartily endorse what you said about the Patriots. And second, I am not on vacation. But I want to take just a little bit of issue with you on this, because I think there is this problem.
We agree on everything. We can't take issue.
Well, no, we agree on the important things.
Okay.
We mean sports teams in Boston. I think there is a bit of a false balance problem that's going on here. That when you look at the study, first of all, public radio is not equivalent, is not a left-wing operation. The New York Times, the Washington Post, these, their editorial pages are where they are, but the kind of work everybody on this panel does, who's not an opinion writer, is sort of an attempt to get at the truth. And even opinion writers have an obligation to base their opinions on fact. When you look at the media consumption in the country, there really are fundamentally different media consumption patterns on the right and on the left. This very good study by Harvard and MIT, which of course naturally makes it untrue because it's these northeastern universities, but this very good study shows that liberals do consume tribal media, if you will, but they also consume an enormous amount of other kinds of media, whereas there is a substantial body of opinion on the right end that consumes almost entirely partisan media, which gets at Glenn's point. And I think it's very important in this period to keep in mind these kinds of asymmetry, because I think they help explain the rise of Trump and how he became so strong inside the Republican Party.
I agree with that.
Oh, we're back in agreement. Thank you.
You know, I realized as I was getting ready for this and asking all these political questions, there are so many things that we're not talking about because we're talking about all the drama in the Trump White House. And I just thought of a few that are probably important things. Robots and how they're going to change the way that we work in this country or don't work. Obesity, one of the leading causes of death. Student debt, $1 trillion outstanding. And climate change, of course. Do you think it's possible at this moment, given everything that's going on in Washington, for some of these long-term, very important challenges that the country is going to face to be dealt with? Are they being dealt with?
You want to take a crack at robots and obesity?
I don't know. I would say that start by saying that at first I thought you were going to ask about like a coverage question there, and first I would say that I think Trump in Washington is everybody's beat. Whether you're covering robots or student debt or climate change, it's how Trump is affecting those issues.
Right.
And that's how you're going to get coverage on those. That's how you're going to get readership on those issues, and that's what the story is, frankly. I would also kind of hesitate to blame Trump for inaction in Washington. But also at the same time, that's one of the great promises that Trump brought into office, not dissimilar from Obama, frankly. I mean, he was going to come in and do things differently. He was going to put aside politics as usual, and we see sort of, like Obama to a certain degree. It didn't, I think, maybe lasted a little. His honeymoon lasted maybe a little bit longer than 6 months, but that's not happening. I mean, the fact of, like Glenn mentioned earlier, this idea of I'm not on vacation. And the nuance he wants to play with this that seems to me to be sort of the typical Washington, trying to have it both ways there.
Rick, do you want to weigh in?
Well, I was sitting here thinking that if we were in the first 6 months of Hillary Clinton, there'd be 3 people in the front row, and we might be talking about policy. I mean, I think one of the remarkable things is the degree to which Trump has dragged us all into his psychic force field. It's remarkable the degree to which his inner psychology is projected in and sort of infects the political dialogue and the conduct of our institutions in a way that's remarkable. So I think we can't overlook the effect of who Trump is and not put him in analytic boxes like it's this strategy or that strategy. He has a disorder, and we're living it all out. That said, the issues you're talking about, climate change, we see real drastic changes in the EPA under Scott Pruitt, who is industry's best friend. We see them withdrawing from the Paris Accord, and that's really gotten changes. Robots not so much, but the remarkable thing is Trump is blaming job loss and dislocation on free trade when you're talking about the real problem, which is mechanization and automation. And he's still lying to people about that. And until somebody, and Democrats should say, look, okay, immigration is a genuine issue in terms of not our generosity, but how many people can absorb. Until they say, yes, indeed, automation is a problem, but we can't fix that other than through retraining and other things for you, until there's some sort of rational response to that, then we're going to be in this mess where the issues you're talking about are very real, but they're lied about.
I think, first of all, I have an obvious conflict of interest on the obesity issue, so I won't comment. But on the one hand, on the other hand, on the one hand, Trump is clearly putting new, if you will, right-wing issues or parts of the particular kind of right-wing. There's a good piece by one of the authors at this festival in the Times this morning where we haven't been talking about cutting the number of immigrants who come into America, this cotton proposal that Trump endorsed. That's shifting the agenda, the deregulatory agenda that we talked about the other night. It's extraordinary how much, and that Rick mentioned in the area of the environment, that's real stuff. It's stuff that I am personally very against, most of it, almost all of it, but that's real stuff. On the other hand, we are not talking much about doing a whole lot for the people who voted for Trump because they were economically discontent. It's really remarkable how little is happening to them, and that the repeal of Obamacare was actually going to hurt that constituency. And that is really one substantive debate we have had, that the fact that Obamacare repeal ran into the result it did, I like to say it's the triumph of the philosopher Joni Mitchell. You don't know what you got till it's gone. And it was the first time that people looked at the Affordable Care Act and said, wait a minute, this might benefit me, or it benefits my community, it benefits my hospital. So that was a substantive debate. But we're missing opportunities in this period, I think, to talk about issues we really need to talk about as a country.
I'm glad you brought up the Affordable Care Act, because on the one hand, it's kind of amazing that the Republican Congress said no to that repeal. On the other hand, it got really close, given the fact that all of the experts looked at that and said, this is a terrible bill, and it's going to send millions and millions of people off their insurance. Ashley, what did you think of that last-minute vote by John McCain to stop that?
I mean, I thought it was really riveting. We were talking about CNN did a really good video where they had an image of the Senate chamber, and they put sort of like little numbers over everyone's head, and it was kind of like watching a football play-by-play, right? It was the equivalent of being like, so-and-so drops back in the pocket and watch him going long, except it was literally like, and now McConnell's face turns pink, and like watch John McCain like hesitate, and you had Schumer waving to the Democrats not to applaud. So as someone who covered Congress for 3 years and really hated it, I thought it was just like a return of that great political theater. But I don't know that I have that much to add on the policy side, unfortunately.
The one thing you mentioned how close that vote was. I think one thing that got kind of overshadowed in that was there was a thought that it was so close because of exactly what McCain was going to do. He was going to by voting against that and being the 51st vote against that, he gave cover to guys like Ron Johnson and a number of people who were going to vote who had expressed concerns about this bill the entire way and then ended up voting for it. So I think McCain made that a lot closer than it may have been.
Glenn, were you surprised by that? I went to bed and I couldn't believe it when I woke up and heard that McCain had voted no.
Well, I think he is the chairman of the Revenge Caucus in the Senate, right? And I mean, I think what you're seeing here is the Republican Party is not a programmatic party. It's a cultural party. It's a party that is bound together by a whole bunch of disparate stuff, and a lot of it is negative at the moment. And I think one of the reasons why Trump has emerged as the candidate and eventually the president of the United States is because he, more than anyone, for all the contradictions that we've talked about, for all the lying and the dissembling and the lack of attention span, is the candidate who best represents that primal feeling that Republican voters have, which is that their country is slipping away from them. And Obamacare became, it's not so much a program. It's, I forgot, I think it may have been, maybe Ashley said this in the other panel, actually my wife said this, I'm going to give her credit. Talking about, there was a Kentucky voter who loves the Kentucky healthcare exchange and said, I love this healthcare exchange, but boy, I hate Obamacare, right? I think there is a sense, folks are not focused on the individual granularity of policy, even insofar as it affects them. I understood this for the first time about 5 years ago when I was covering a vote in Congress to extend unemployment insurance. And Republicans were voting against extending unemployment insurance, which struck me as an entirely crazy phenomenon. But it represented, I think, a broader set of cultural imperatives that I think are driving this debate. And I think that is where I think Democrats and the quote-unquote coastal elites get it wrong. What they don't really understand is that he represents a feeling, not a set of policies.
Rick, one of the areas where even Trump critics give him some credit is the national security team that he has assembled, Mattis and McMaster. You've written about this, about his foreign policy, which you don't think is so great.
Well, it isn't. And I mean, Mattis is in his own lane over there, and he has influence over certain things. But if you look at what Trump's foreign policy has been, it's been a departure from the principles we've had since World War II, where we believed in global institutions, we were promoting liberal democracy. We at least said some things about human rights, even if we screwed that up a lot. His passion for dictators, from the guy in the Philippines, to the Chinese guy who he likes until he doesn't. His visit to Saudi Arabia, which exports terrorism, which he failed to mention. His visit to Poland, where he basically encouraged an autocrat to be more autocratic, is a great departure. But more than that, I mean, I say that he's a guy who looks at the post-World War II order, and he's like a man looking at a Rorschach test who sees a wolf's head instead of a flower. To him, the whole system of alliances was a bad deal in which America got screwed, and he's reducing the world to a one-on-one bargaining situation where he bargains with somebody else like he's doing real estate and stiffing contractors. And so again, I mean, his vision is so idiosyncratic, and where there's McMaster and Mattis on one hand, there's Bannon and Stephen Miller on the other hand. And Trump is so sort of dystopian that it's really hard for me to believe the old Republican construct. We're going to put three square-jawed, white-haired, white wise men around him, and he's all going to be okay. I don't think that's true. And Rex Tillerson is, by the way, an embarrassment.
Mark, you want to weigh in?
I guess the one thing I would add is I think before people give so much credit to Trump for filling his foreign policy team with things, I mean, H.R. McMaster was Mike Flynn originally, and Mike Flynn, obviously, arguably the National Security Advisor job is the probably second most sensitive job in all of government, the first being the president. And, Flynn has been accused of some pretty amazingly criminal things, and, we could talk all about that. So I guess by matter of
Why do you say that,
correction-
by the way? Why is it the second most sensitive?
Because you're the national security. You're in the White House. You're literally, you have an office probably within 30 feet from where the Oval Office is. You are really the first line of both defense of what goes into him information-wise, but also what he's allowed to do as far as engaging with the world, as far as engaging with military power. I mean, the kinds of things that people have nightmares about when they think about what it would be like to have an unhinged president. I mean, this is the guy who executes this more than any, and then that works its way down the chain of command to defense, to state, to Homeland Security, what have you. But it all starts there.
So in the days before Election Day, we decided on our 2-hour show Here and Now that on the day after the election, everybody's going to want to know what's going on. So we'll do a special 4-hour show. And we thought that the election was probably going to turn out differently than it did, and didn't realize that we were giving ourselves way more work when, in fact, every day would be like Election Day for months and months and months after that. Ashley, do you think that post-Trump, that things will go back to the way that they were, or are we just in a new world now of this is how politics is going to happen from now on?
2 points. So one is I sort of subscribe to the David Axelrod theory of politics, that each subsequent president is a reaction to the previous one. And I've kind of wondered, we've crossed all these barriers where Anthony Scaramucci could give that New Yorker interview and at least for a couple of days face no repercussions. And I remember covering Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush, where literally when I covered Mitt Romney, the definition of a gaffe was once he said the trees in Michigan were just the right height. So I was sort of wondering, will we go back to losing our minds over that sort of gaffe, or has Trump raised the bar? And I do sort of think that whoever the next president is, there may be a reaction back. So the bar could go back to our more traditional sense. But I also think just in terms of the interest, it's fascinating. I'm sure everyone up here has these experiences of covering Trump. There's just, and again, when I covered other candidates, if I covered Romney or Jeb and someone found out as a political reporter, it's kind of interesting. And so at like Thanksgiving or out at a bar with friends, I would get like a question, right? But the level of fascination and in the weeds of the average voter and average citizen for this president is so outsized. And I have a million examples, but my best is that I got a call one day I was at work and my phone rang and it was my dentist. And so I picked up and it turned out I was overdue for a cleaning, but I was like, Dr. Schlafstein? And in the 25 years I've been going to this dentist, his hygienist is always the one who calls me when I'm overdue for a cleaning. And so after we scheduled, the appointment for 2 Mondays hence, he literally stayed on the phone with me for 20 minutes, and it was clear he had called because he wanted to know what's Bannon doing? Did he outmaneuver Priebus? And on the whole, I think that's kind of good for democracy that people are so deeply engaged.
I love your dentist. I want to underscore everything Ashley just said on both sides in the sense where maybe we can have hope that the next president will be warm, tolerant, intellectual, embracing of the country. But I do agree that we tend to react. You could hardly see a bigger contrast between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. I think it just, although Trump did not win the popular vote, we should always remember that. And I also think that you're very much right about what will our standards be after this, because we've never seen standards stretched the way they are here. But I think the good news that your dentist story suggests is that there is a degree of engagement in the country and a degree of activism. If you take, again, the Affordable Care Act, I really do think the activism on the progressive side made a major difference in bringing about that result. And so the paradox of Trumpism is that it's possible that he will help repair our democracy, not by anything he does, but by the reaction in the country that he is bringing about. And that is the glass 1/10 full view of the moment. But I think there may be something to it, because I think something has happened in the country in its attitude toward why you have to pay attention to public life.
I guess I would also add to that. I think Ashley's dentist, by the way, is the new Joe the Plumber of the Vox Populi. I actually think that one unintended benefit of what's going on now, possibly, this might be more wishful than truthful, but is a kind of bipartisanship in Washington, the beginnings of which we're seeing, not so much around health care, because the vote was still 40, 51, 50, it was almost party line in the vote. But there have been, first of all, some of the most eloquent anti-Trump stuff has come from the right. These are all, conservative writers, commentators have been, not across the board, but largely extremely eloquent on this. And look, these are conservatives, Republicans usually, who don't have to face voters. So the question is this going to get beyond self-perpetuation? But in the Senate this week, or last week, if you look at Russia sanctions, if you look at bipartisan things put in place to make it harder to fire Mueller, fixing Obamacare, a lot of bipartisan things getting done in which you do sort of see a permission structure sort of bubbling up a little bit, in which people can act on maybe unifying American principles rather than partisan ones. And the unifying force here is both on the progressive side, certainly anti-Trump, but I think on a more bipartisan side, just acting with decency and responsibility as leaders.
I just want to hear from Glenn on this issue if we can. Do you think things are going to go back to the way they were at any point post-Trump?
Well, I wish I shared everyone's optimism. I don't think that's hard to say. Look, I remember when George W. Bush was a reaction against the indignity of Bill Clinton, that he was going to bring dignity back to the White House, right? So we do tend to have these cycles of reaction. The other thing I think we underplay is the brute force element of American politics. A lot of this is demographics. So we're dealing, and the reason why those of us who are super sophisticated in talking to pollsters like Joel Benenson 5 times a day in 2016, who were assuring us that the demographic wave was about to wipe out the last of the Republican dead-enders, right? I think what we fail to grasp is that we just have these large movements of people in this country. We have a lot of changes going on in the state of Arizona right now. Pollsters are having real trouble figuring out what's going on in Arizona. Pollsters, one of the interesting phenomena of the 2016 campaign is you couldn't really poll Michigan very well. So you have movements now that are moving beyond the quote-unquote science of politics. So we tend to think of these things in terms of conflict and personalities, but larger things are going on in terms of economics and demographics. I don't see the fever, quote-unquote, being broken, as Obama said over and over and over again, because you have a vast money-making machine on the right wing of this country based on exploiting, in some instances, the anger of a fairly large segment of the population who are basically cordoned off from kind of mainstream sources of information and processing those. People are making a fortune off of this stuff. I think, to me, an interesting space to watch is what's going on with Fox. We just saw another Fox host tumble because of this pervasive culture of sexual harassment, which is just amazing. And you see Fox almost sort of aging out of its role of being sort of the arbiter of this stuff, and that title being conferred on other people. I think Fox is a fundamental part of why Donald Trump got elected president. And I think, to a certain extent, watching what's going on at Fox may be more important in terms of discerning the future of what's going on than watching the White House.
Who has the power in the Fox-Trump relationship? Who has more power there? I can never tell. Anybody?
I think you've seen it differently at different moments. I mean, Trump is the first guy to face down Roger Ailes from the right. When you looked early on in the campaign, when he had the fight with Megyn Kelly, Ailes kind of had to back down in that period. So there clearly, I think there is a distinctive Trump, Breitbart, Bannon sort of wave on the right. And I think Glenn's point about the aging of the Fox constituency, I mean, all cable news audiences are relatively old, but Fox is particularly old. So I think up to this point, if you had to score it, I forgot who used the football analogy. Well, everybody's used football analogies today. It was Trump had sort of shown more power than Bannon. But if Fox ever turned on Trump, you wonder what effect that would have. Would that begin to push the right? I just don't see how all Fox turns on Trump because, for the money-making reasons that Glenn described, it would not be a good business decision.
Right.
I want to deal a little bit with the flip side of what Glenn said, which is that Democrats in 2016 were assuming that they would turn out a rising number of a rising demographic, and that would overwhelm the map. The problem is the map. 16% of American counties went for Clinton. 84% went for Trump. We not only have informational sorting we've been talking about, we have demographic sorting and we have geographic sorting. So we have a bunch of people who will never hear any of us sitting out there who are listening to the folks we've been talking about and who can't be reached. And until Democrats can figure out a way to have a presence in those states and a voice in those states which is broader than this issue or that issue and that issue, which speaks to the sense of dislocation not only that white Trump voters have, but middle class and threatened voters generally have, regardless of ethnicity, they're still going to be struggling because that map, I think, is pretty. It's almost a form of de facto gerrymandering. It's pretty intractable.
Okay, we are at the end of our time, but what we're going to do is I'm going to take one question.
But only if you contribute to WBUR. Right. This sounds like one of those.
Yeah, let's get a question from this guy right over here.
I'll just say two things. I want to hear from our White House folk on the panel. One is it's dangerous, and two, the history is in both parties, actually, in this case, there's always unease with leaks. Was particular unease on Trump's part and on Nixon's part, interestingly. But usually leakers find their way to get information out. I hope that continues to be the case. So it's alarming, but it's not going to shut off sources of information, is my sense.
I think there's two sorts of leaks. There's the national security leaks, or the sort of deep state leaks, and those sorts of things that are informing a lot of the really great investigative journalism. And I'm not doing that, so I can't speak to that. But in terms of sort of the day-to-day politics and the palace intrigue stories, where the stakes, to be certain, are a lot lower, I think as of now it's hard to see those sorts of leaks stopping, because the way this White House and these aides communicate with the president, for whatever reason, is, again, you would think it would be easier to sort of walk into the Oval Office and tell Donald Trump what you think, but in fact, the more effective way is to plant that story in the New York Times or the Washington Post, or have someone say it on television and get it to the president that way. So a lot of these leaks are born out of competing factions and competing agendas, which is something political reporters currently benefit from.
Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I just think, the question is, first of all, Session is performing, as he always will be, to an audience of one when he talks about this stuff. And the other thing about it is, you got to get people to do that job. Who in the Justice Department? Are there enough lawyers in the Justice Department? Is there enough institutional support to go on a witch hunt against people who are leaking draft plans from the EPA? The NatSec stuff is a little easier. So if you find somebody who leaked something which could potentially get a U.S. service member killed, well, the public can get behind that kind of thing. If you get behind somebody who's leaking stuff on the Russia investigation, or is leaking something from the Department of State, or is leaking something from the West Wing, how are you going to get a career prosecutor for the Department of Justice to really go after that? I think what we're going to start to see as we get to the year mark is a lot of people are going to be leaving this administration. And I think if Sessions decides to do this, to really push ahead, he's going to have a civil war inside DOJ that's going to be incredibly politically damaging.
Okay. I want to thank our amazing panel. And enjoy the rest of the book festival.